Hello there, this is Steve Hughes with Virtual Piano Studio. Today's video tutorial is going to cover Ebb Tide, really famous, wonderful, beautiful standard written by Robert Maxwell, Carl Sigman, and it's going to cover really the upper triads of jazz chords. Really a continuing series here with some other videos I've done in demystifying these complex chords, or taking chords that are pretty basic and then being able to extend beyond the 7 and to provide a fuller, more interesting harmony. So let's go ahead and get started. What I'm going to do first is kind of show you what the actual chord structure is first off, as written in the real book. And you'll notice that I have almost what looks like fractions. Some of you may have seen this before, if you're my students especially. And basically what I want to focus on first is the bottom number, or sorry, the bottom chord, G7 in this case. So that's actually what's written. Now on top, that's actually a way for keyboardists or musicians to interpret the chord and extend beyond the chord, but simplifying it in a way that, hey, I know E minor, and I can play that over a G or a G7 and be able to get a more complex sound. So if we look at this G7 chord, this is what it is built in root position. But if we actually play just the shell is just the 1, the 7, or sometimes the 1 and 3 of the chord. And if we play an E minor over the top, now we actually have a G13 chord. However, that doesn't sound very pleasant. It sounds okay. The E minor by itself is great, but we're going to restructure it to where the melody's on top. And you'll notice that the actual melody note is G to start off with. So we're building an E minor chord under the G melody note. And when we put that all together, then we just include the melody note E on the end of 4 there. Now we have a fuller sound. So that's what we're talking about today. So I'm going to go through each chord, say what the chord that's printed, and then build these upper triads. And why are they called upper triads? Well, typically in a chord structure, for instance, C major 7, 1, 3, 5, 7. That gets you all the way to 7, but we actually have 7 notes to pick from. That actually gets me all the way to 13. And I'm building out a C major 13 chord, and there's a reason why I'm sharpening the F, but I'm not going to discuss that in this video. The idea though is that we can extend beyond the 7. Okay, and we're just going up in odd numbers, 7, 9, 11 to 13. So let's continue forward. We have a C major 7 here. You can actually see this chord. You can see the E minor on top of the C. So that's pretty easy. We're not even going past the 7 here. You could actually play an E minor 7 over a C to create a major 9 sound. But that's not really necessary in this part of the tune, but you can revise really any of these chords. So we have, and this is a pretty basic, I'm just playing an E minor in the right hand over C. So I'm going to go back, and you'll notice, hey, it's E minor in both of these chords. The main difference here is the inversion of the chord. So here, the G was on top of the E minor chord, and now we're in root position. Why is that? Well, the melody dictates it. So if you're playing as a pianist, you're playing the melody. The melody almost always is going to go on top, so it can be heard above the rest of the harmony, and then you're just stacking the chord underneath in a way that's pleasing. So we're going to go ahead and move forward. So far we have now, there's a big, long hold here. We have a half note tied to a dotted quarter. 3.5 beats. So you have a lot of space to fill. And so what a lot of pianists will do, especially if you're playing in a solo environment there, you can fill the space with, and in this case, I'm just going to talk about arpeggios. So you don't have to think about C major 7. All you need to do is really focus on E minor. That was the chord structure, right? So if you know how to play E minor arpeggios, either from learning from classical technique or just in technique in general, just taking that chord and working it up. Now we can be very creative how we do that. We can just run it up. We can do actually patterns within the chord. There's so many different ways you can break apart a chord. And so you have all this space. Okay, so as we go through, you can experiment with arpeggios and different starting notes, breaking them apart. Or you could take really the basic route, which just, start with 1 octave first, and then go to 2 octaves, and then eventually 3 octaves. Then you have to sit there and figure out, this is how I want it to sound. Does it flow within the context of the tune? All right, next chord, we have A minor 7. All right, in this particular case, I have written E minor over A. You'll notice that the C is missing, but you can always fill in the C later. The reason why I have this as an E minor chord is because the top note is B, and then we have the A, and so we can kind of leave it somewhat ambiguous there. You don't have to have the C. It's a kind of an open sound. And what's cool about that is we're going from an E minor to an E minor. So the same chord on top. All right. So I'm going to go back and put it all the way through here. See if I can get the entire line there. Here we go. And there you may want to vary up your pattern. Okay, now we get to the next chord, a D minor 7. Here's what it looks like in root position. The top 3 notes are in F major over D. Okay. Now, the E is on the top of the melody. So, it's best to either play this as an F major 7 or an A minor so that the E is on top. So we're already changing the chord. We're making this a D minor 9 chord, even though it's a D minor 7, because we want to have that melody on top. Now, with your arpeggio, you can either take this F major 7 and build it up, and or do different kind of patterns with that, variations, or you could do like A minor, because look, the A minor's on top. That gives a little bit different sound. It's focusing on the 5 and the 7 and the 9 here of the D minor chord. So it's all really up to you and how you want to do that. All right, moving on. We have the G7 again. All right, and since the melody note is E, we're going to go ahead and think of this as an E minor over G7. Okay, then we have a C major 7 chord with the G on top. So we're going to go ahead and think of this as an E minor. Now, in the actual standard, it's just a C major. But I feel that if I'm going from the 7th chords to a regular C major chord, it's kind of, it's not really segueing properly. The harmony is not fitting. So I went ahead and made this a C major 7 chord. So here's your C major 7 chord. Here's your E minor over C. Okay. And then here's your melody note G, and we're building the E minor down. And of course, whatever you want to play there. And then we get to a B flat 6 chord. Now, I have highlighted the note G in the melody because that is actually the 6. So you have a lot of different options here. You don't really need to double the 6, but you can. You could just play it straight. Just add the G on top of the chord, but now we have a lot of B flats in the mix. So maybe I spread the notes out a little bit. But just think of it as a B flat major chord, adding the G, and I may take out this F in the right hand so I can have some space there. And then I can add the F in the left hand. To me, it sounds like a better spaced chord. And check this out. Now it becomes a G minor over B flat. Okay? So then I can, when I do my run, I can actually think of it as a G minor run. And then we get to the first inning here. We have an A7 chord. Now, most standards, when we get to the dominant chords, you want to try to play beyond the 7. And when I build out an A7 chord, the top triad is a diminished triad. Most of us are going to be more familiar with major and minor triads. So why not just go ahead and let's go and extend this to the 9. And what that allows us to do is actually to get a chord that's has more depth to it. And so when we extend it, we can actually get to this flat 9 here. It's a more interesting chord. So what I have done here is I've added the flat 9. Oops. I've added a flat 9. And now you can think of this as a B flat diminished 7. And these are actually really easy chords to find because they're all 3 half steps apart. So anytime we play a dominant and we want to kind of get that interesting flat 9 sound, you just build a fully diminished chord. Those are all 3 half steps apart. Let's get some context from the B flat. And of course you can arpeggiate that. All right, so then let's go to the last chord of the A section. Well, actually we have a 2-5, and you'll notice that I have written 2-5, and for this particular student, this is a reminder. This is a part of the 2-5-1 progression that you'll hear very commonly at the end of sections. That's going to get us back to the top. So D minor, flat 5. There it is in root position, and it's really just an F minor over a D. So we have an F minor chord, and look, the melody note is F. So we're just going to take the F and build down. There's our F minor chord, and then we have our D in the left hand. Now, you'll notice I'm playing octaves. If, it just depends. We can do sevenths, but we're kind of down low in the keyboard. So for now, we're just going to do octaves. You could also do tenths if you can reach that. Or you can actually, like arpeggiate the left hand as well. A lot of different things there. But if you notice I'm playing octaves, octaves aren't the best left hand, best thing to play with the left hand. But in this case, what we're doing is we're stylizing this piece and building it from the right hand down. So we can always change the left hand later. Okay, and then we go to a G7 flat 9. Now, we can either build a diminished chord, or you'll see I have a note here, the C down to the B. What happens is in a 2-5-1 progression from the 2 to the 5, really you only need to move one note. So in this case, we're going to move this C down a half step. Here's the D in the bass, and then move this down, and we're to the chord. So if you know you're in a 2-5 progression, you just have that one voice you got to move, and that helps with muscle memory. And there's other options, but for now I think this is the best option for this particular student. So I'm going to go through and play through that 8 measure section. There we go. Now we're back to the repeat, back to the beginning of the section. So the idea here is to really understanding that we can break apart these complicated chords into really just knowing major and minor triads. Now, some of them you're going to need to be able to play 7th chords on maybe more advanced chords that have like sharp 11, or when we get into those 11ths and 13ths, you're going to have to build out even further to get there. But for the most part on these standards, if you know your major and minor chords, then you can think of it in this way, and it makes it a lot easier to think, okay, take the melody, build this chord underneath it, and then just have the left hand root, and now I have this more interesting sound and harmony than just basic, even just basic 7th harmony.